Hi, in this demo I'm going to show you how you can use the Turkish cast on as a provisional cast on. It's more often used to give you a sealed end for something like toe-up socks, but it can also be very useful as a provisional cast on. This shawl in front of me was a design I did for the little grey sheep, and they wanted a rectangular shawl that would grow from the centre outwards. So I've done the cast on in the centre here, and then I've worked the old shell pattern on one side and then come back and worked in the opposite direction, and then the whole thing has been finished with a knitted border. So if I put this aside for a minute, I can then demonstrate the cast on. So some of you may have already seen the demonstration for Turkish cast on for toe-up socks, and it starts in exactly the same way. So you need 2 circular needles, as I've got here, and it just makes life easier if you can use 2 different colours. It doesn't matter, obviously, yourself, but when I'm demonstrating and when you're first learning, it just can be helpful if you've got 2 different coloured tips to know where you are. So we're going to start with a slip knot, and I'm going to put the slip knot onto the metal needle which I've got below the bamboo needle. You then need to make sure you bring the yarn behind the 2 needles and then start wrapping the needles with the yarn. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm just going to cast on a few stitches, as you can see here, 8 stitches. Hold on to the tail end so I don't lose it, and then I'm going to pull the metal needle forward so that the stitches go onto the cord. That makes it much easier to now work the first row of stitches off the bamboo needle. So again, making sure I keep the yarn around this cord because it is a stitch. I'm going to go into the first loop and knit the stitch. So if you have watched the Turkish cast on for socks, you will see this is exactly the same start to the cast on. So I'm going to knit my 8 stitches off the bamboo needle, but I'm not now going to knit in the round. I'm going to continue knitting just on the bamboo needle. So if I was knitting stocking stitch, I would turn the knitting around because I am knitting flat, not in the round, and I would now purl a row. So I'm going to purl my row here. And I would continue just working on the bamboo needle for whatever stitch pattern I was doing. I would just continue on the bamboo needle, and again I would turn. Now in this situation I've got ordinary circulars. I would suggest if you've only got ordinary circulars, it would be worth putting point protectors onto the ends of the needle that is not being used. But if you've got interchangeable needles, then you just take the points off and put your cord ends, cord stoppers, onto the ends of the cord, and then you don't need to worry about that needle at all until you've finished all your knitting. So I'm just going to knit another row and then I'm going to cast off so I can show you how you would then start knitting from the other direction. So I'm going to turn around and I'm going to cast off this row I'm going to work a knit cast off just to make it quick and simple. So of course I'm sure you all know how to cast off, but don't forget not to pull your stitches too tight so that you keep a nice cast off that's not pulling the knitting in. And then I'm just going to pull the ball through because I don't have any scissors with me at the minute to actually cut the yarn end off. I'll pull that through and we leave it like that. So we've finished that section, so we now need to go back so that we can knit from the stitches at the other end. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and the slip knot. So if I discard my bamboo needle, and I'm going to pick up another colour, that'll be nice and bright. I'm going to push the stitches to the end of the metal needle, and if you push them to the end where the slip knot end is, you'll be starting on the same side as the previous piece. So I've got my 8 stitches here, and I would rejoin my yarn at the centre here, and I'm now just going to knit, oops, don't want to slip that a bit, knit away in the opposite direction. So I've got all my stitches waiting for me, and in a situation like the shawl where you have a lot of stitches to start with, it can be a lot easier than, oops, I split that end stitch, let me just do that again. Right, so that's one row, and then obviously I would turn and purl back or work in whatever the stitch pattern is that's given for the design you're working. But if you're working on something like the shawl, which is has a large number of stitches cast on at the beginning, it's just a little bit easier and quicker using this method of casting on than using one of the other provisional cast on methods where you then have to go back and pick up the loops. And as you can see, I'm now knitting away in the other direction to give me a perfectly matched cast on. So that's how you can use the Turkish cast on as a provisional cast on.